The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty road leading into Redemption Creek, and Eleanor Hayes felt each ray like a brand against her parched skin. Her horse had gone lame 2 miles back, forcing her to walk the rest of the way, with nothing but a nearly empty canteen and memories she'd spent 15 years trying to forget. The town shimmered in the distance, like a mirage, and she wondered if she'd even make it that far. Her worn boots kicked up small clouds of red dust with each step. The wedding band on her left hand, a band that had replaced another ring long ago, caught the light, mocking her with its dull gleam. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore now, though barely. Her husband had died 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but debts and the clothes on her back. She'd sold everything, even her dignity, to make the journey west to her sister's homestead in California. But fate had other plans. Before we continue with Eleanor's journey, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. I'm also curious, where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments. The general store stood at the edge of town, its weathered sign creaking in the hot wind. Eleanor's vision blurred as she stumbled toward it, her legs threatening to give out. She pushed through the door, and the relative coolness inside made her sway. "Water," she managed to whisper to the man behind the counter. "Please, I can pay." Her trembling fingers reached for the simple gold band on her finger, prepared to trade it for survival. It meant nothing to her anyway, a symbol of a loveless marriage entered into because she'd believed her heart had died 15 years ago in a barn fire outside of Dallas. "No need for that, ma'am," a voice said from behind her, deep and familiar in a way that made her blood run cold. "Water's free for travelers in need." Eleanor froze. That voice, after all these years, she would know it anywhere, in a crowded room, in a thunderstorm, in her dreams. Slowly, as if moving through honey, she turned around. Jackson Cole stood in the doorway, backlit by the harsh afternoon sun, and for a moment, Eleanor thought she might be hallucinating from dehydration. But no, there he was, broader in the shoulders than she remembered, his face weathered by time and sun. But those eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were exactly as they'd been the last time she'd seen them, filled with devastation as her father dragged her away. Her gaze dropped to his hands, rough and calloused from years of ranch work. And there, on his right hand, because he'd never been conventional, sat a small silver ring with a tiny turquoise stone, the ring she'd given him when she was 17 years old, made from her mother's broken necklace. The traveler asked for water, but when she saw the cowboy, she wept. "You still wear the ring I gave you." The words came out broken, barely a whisper, but they hit Jackson like a physical blow. His weathered hand went to the ring instinctively, protective, as if she might try to take it back. "Never took it off," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion he'd buried for over a decade. "Not once in 15 years." Eleanor's knees buckled, and Jackson moved with the speed of a man who'd spent his life working with unpredictable horses and cattle. He caught her before she hit the floor, sweeping her up in arms that had grown strong from years of hard labor. The contact sent shockwaves through both of them, muscle memory of embraces long denied. "Jim, get some water and willow bark tea," Jackson barked at the shopkeeper. "And send someone to Doc Morrison. Tell him we're headed to my ranch." "Very well." "Jackson, I'm fine," Eleanor protested weakly, but her body betrayed her, going limp in his arms. "Like hell you are." His jaw clenched as he carried her outside to his wagon. "How long since you ate, drank? Eleanor, what happened to you?" She wanted to answer, but darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she remembered was the feel of his heartbeat against her cheek and the scent of leather, sage, and something uniquely Jackson, a smell she'd never forgotten, despite trying so hard to bury it, along with everything else from her past. When Eleanor woke, the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of amber and rose. She lay in a bed far more comfortable than any she'd known in years, covered with a quilt that smelled of lavender and sunshine. The room was simple but clean, with curtains fluttering in the evening breeze. "Easy now." Jackson's voice came from a chair beside the bed. "Doc says you're dehydrated and half-starved. Says it's a wonder you made it as far as you did." Eleanor turned her head to look at him. He sat with his elbows on his knees, that silver ring catching the fading light. His hair, once jet black, now had threads of silver at the temples. Lines bracketed his mouth and eyes, lines that spoke of hard living and harder choices. "I didn't know you lived in Redemption Creek," she said softly. "I was just passing through, on my way to California." "I know, Jim told me." Jackson leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Been here about 10 years. Built up a ranch north of town. Cole's Pride, they call it, though the pride part's debatable most days." "You achieved your dream then, your own land." There was genuine happiness in her voice, mixed with an aching sadness for what they'd lost. Some dreams. His eyes never left her face. "Lost the ones that mattered most on a September night, 15 years ago, when your father dragged you away and married you off to Charles Whitmore, before I could even—" He stopped himself, jaw working. "I searched for you, Eleanor. For 2 years, I searched." "I know. Papa made sure I knew, every time you came looking." Eleanor's voice cracked. "He told me you'd given up, that you'd married someone else, that you'd forgotten all about the foolish girl who'd promised to wait for you." Jackson's hands clenched into fists. "I never married, never even looked at another woman. You think I'd forget you? You think I'd forget the girl who taught me to read by candlelight in her father's barn? Who stood up to her father and 3 brothers to defend me when I was nothing but a ranch hand's son? Who gave me her mother's ring and promised we'd build a life together? Papa said you'd taken money, that you'd sold me out for $200 and a recommendation letter." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. "I wanted to die, Jackson. I wanted to die rather than marry Charles. But Papa said if I refused, he'd make sure you were accused of horse theft. They hang horse thieves." "Jesus, Eleanor." Jackson was beside her on the bed in an instant, gathering her carefully in his arms. "I never took a dime. Your father fired me that night, had his men beat me and dump me on the road outside of Dallas. Took me 3 days to drag myself back to town, and by then you were gone, married and gone to Boston." They held each other as the sun disappeared completely, leaving them in the gentle darkness of the room. 15 years of pain and longing and lost dreams flowed between them in that embrace. "He died 6 months ago," Eleanor finally said. "Charles." Heart gave out. He wasn't cruel, Jackson, but he wasn't you. He could never be you. We had no children. He left me nothing but debts. I sold everything to have enough to reach my sister in Sacramento. She married a shopkeeper there. She's my only family now that Papa's gone." "Your father's dead?" Jackson pulled back to look at her face. 2 years now, died angry and alone. My brothers wanted nothing to do with me after I inherited nothing." She laughed bitterly. Turns out Papa gambled away the family fortune. There was nothing left but the house, and the bank took that. Jackson's thumb brushed away her tears with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "You don't have to go to California, Eleanor. You could stay here. Jackson, just to rest, to recover your strength. I've got a housekeeper, Rosa, who'd welcome the female company. The ranch is doing well, better than well, actually. I supply horses to the army and several ranches across 3 territories. I've got 40 head of cattle, good water, strong fences." He paused, and his voice dropped lower. "And I've got a heart that never learned to stop loving you." Eleanor closed her eyes against the wave of emotion. "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "Hell, Eleanor, I'm begging." His forehead rested against hers. "Stay, even if just for a while. Let me take care of you the way I should have been able to do 15 years ago." The next morning, Eleanor woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed in the simple cotton dress Rosa had left for her, one of the housekeeper's daughter's old dresses altered to fit. When she made her way to the kitchen, she found Jackson at the table, reviewing ledgers, his silver ring glinting as he wrote. "Rosa made breakfast before heading into town for supplies," he said, looking up. "Insisted I make sure you ate every bite. She's a formidable woman. You don't want to cross her." Eleanor smiled, taking the plate he handed her. The food was simple but delicious, and she realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real meal. They ate in companionable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing someone, even if those years had been spent apart. "Come on," Jackson said after they'd finished. "Let me show you the ranch." Cole's Pride spread out across a valley cupped between gentle hills, with a creek running through it that sparkled in the morning sun. The ranch house was modest but solid, built from lumber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Corrals held sleek horses that nickered at Jackson's approach, and in the distance, cattle grazed on grassland that seemed to stretch forever. "It's beautiful," Eleanor breathed. "You built all this?" "With these hands and a lot of help from good men." Jackson leaned against the corral fence, watching her. "That mare there, the dapple gray? She's yours if you want her. Best-tempered horse I've got. She'd be perfect for a rider getting back in the saddle." "I haven't ridden in years," Eleanor admitted. "Charles thought it wasn't proper for a lady." Jackson's expression darkened. "You used to ride like you were born in the saddle. Used to race me across your father's property and win half the time. I was reckless then, young and stupid and—" "Free," Jackson interrupted. "You were free, and you will be again, Eleanor. I swear it." Over the following weeks, Eleanor began to heal, both body and soul. Rosa, a Mexican woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, became her closest friend. The older woman taught her to cook meals that actually tasted good, to mend clothes properly, and to laugh again. Jackson was patient, giving her space while making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. He taught her to ride again, starting with short trips around the property and gradually extending them as her confidence grew. They'd ride out to the creek where wildflowers grew in riotous abundance, and he'd tell her about the year she'd missed. The struggles, the victories, the loneliness that never quite went away. "I bought this land with money I saved from working 3 jobs, he told her one afternoon as they sat by the creek, their horses grazing nearby. "Worked myself near to death for 5 years straight. People thought I was crazy, But I had this idea in my head, this vision of a place that could be ours. Even though you were gone, I couldn't let go of that dream. Eleanor picked a stem of prairie grass, twirling it between her fingers. Did you ever think about trying to find someone else? Rosa mentioned that half the unmarried women in 3 counties have set their caps for you. Jackson snorted. Rosa talks too much. And no, I never thought about it. How could I, when every woman I met, I'd compare to you? When every conversation felt hollow because it wasn't with you? When every sunset reminded me of that last one we watched together, sitting in your father's barn, planning a future we'd never have? She turned to look at him, this man who'd waited, who'd worn her ring for 15 years like a brand over his heart. We were so young, Jackson. What if we'd built our lives on a childish dream? What if we'd married and discovered we didn't really know each other at all? Then we'd have figured it out together. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, tracing the line of her jaw. But I don't think that would have happened. I knew you, Eleanor Hayes. Knew you better than I knew myself. And I suspect you knew me just as well. I still do, she whispered. That's what terrifies me. As spring turned to summer, Eleanor found herself settling into life at Cole's Pride in a way she'd never settled into her life in Boston. She helped Rosa with the cooking and cleaning, not because she had to, but because it felt good to be useful. She learned to tend the garden, to care for the chickens, to help with the horses. Jackson taught her to shoot, standing behind her as she aimed at targets he'd set up near the barn. His hands would steady hers, his breath warm against her neck, and the tension between them would crackle like lightning before a storm. Go slow, she'd said the first time, when the rifle's kick had hurt her shoulder. It hurts. I'll die before I hurt you, he'd replied, his voice fierce and low. And she'd known he meant far more than just the shooting lesson. The hands who worked for Jackson treated her with respect bordering on reverence. Word had spread that she was someone special to the boss, and they'd welcomed her as if she already belonged. There was Tom, the foreman, a grizzled veteran of the Civil War. Miguel and his brother Carlos, both expert horsemen. Young Billy, barely 18, who blushed whenever Eleanor spoke to him. They're good men, Jackson told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of coral and gold. Loyal. They've stuck with me through droughts and hard winters, through times when I wasn't sure we'd make it. You're a good man, Jackson Cole, Eleanor said softly. You always were. Even when we were young and you had nothing, you were rich in the ways that mattered. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the war raging in his eyes, the desire to reach for her, fighting against the fear of pushing too hard, too fast. Eleanor, he started, but she placed her fingers against his lips. I'm not ready yet, she whispered, but I'm getting there. Be patient with me. I've waited 15 years. I can wait as long as you need. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Eleanor was in town with Rosa, picking up supplies, when she saw him, a man she'd hoped never to see again. Gerald Sutton, Charles's business partner from Boston, the man who'd pressured Charles into risky investments that had cost them everything. The man who'd made it clear he expected Eleanor to work off her late husband's debts in very specific ways. She'd fled Boston partly to escape him. And now here he was, stepping out of the hotel with 2 rough-looking men flanking him. Eleanor Whitmore, he drawled, his oily smile making her skin crawl. What a delightful surprise. I've been searching for you, my dear. We have unfinished business. I owe you nothing, Eleanor said. keeping her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Charles's debts died with him. Not according to the law. You see, I have documentation showing you as guarantor on several of his loans. That makes you responsible for the sum of $3,000. His smile widened. But I'm a reasonable man. We can work out an arrangement. The lady said she owes you nothing. Rosa stepped forward, her hand moving to the knife she kept at her belt. And in Redemption Creek, we protect our own. Rosa, it's all right, Eleanor said, even as other townspeople began to gather, drawn by the confrontation. It's not all right, a new voice said, and Eleanor's heart leaped as Jackson strode down the street, flanked by Tom and Miguel. You're harassing a guest in my town, Sutton. That's not how we do things here. Sutton's eyes narrowed as he assessed Jackson. And you are? Jackson Cole. Miss Hayes is under my protection. Whatever business you think you have with her, it goes through me now. Miss Hayes? Sutton laughed. She's Mrs. Whitmore, and she's a debtor. Unless you're prepared to pay $3,000, I suggest you step aside. Jackson's hand didn't move toward the gun at his hip, but every line of his body radiated danger. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to ensure Eleanor's safety and peace of mind. But let's be clear about something. Any documents you have are fraudulent. Eleanor never signed as guarantor for anything. I know this because I know her. She'd never put her name on business dealings she didn't understand. You calling me a liar? Sutton's hand moved toward his own weapon. I'm calling you a fraud and a coward who preys on vulnerable women. Jackson's voice was calm, almost conversational. And I'm telling you to get out of Redemption Creek before sundown, or I'll make you leave. The two men with Sutton shifted uneasily. They'd seen Jackson's reputation, heard the stories. This wasn't a man to trifle with. This isn't over, Sutton snarled. I'll be back with the law. You do that, and I'll have the territorial marshal here waiting for you, very interested in those forged documents you're carrying. Jackson stepped closer, his voice dropping. Leave, now. And if you ever come near Eleanor again, documents won't matter. Neither will the law. Are we clear? Sutton held his gaze for a long moment, then spat in the dust and stalked away, his men following. Eleanor found herself shaking, and suddenly Jackson was there, his arms around her, steady and strong. You're safe. I've got you. You're safe. He'll come back, she whispered. Men like him always do. Let him try. Jackson's jaw was set in a line she remembered from their youth. The expression he got when he decided something and nothing would sway him. I meant what I said, Eleanor. You're under my protection. Anyone who wants to hurt you goes through me first. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She paced her room, reliving the confrontation, imagining all the ways it could have gone worse. Finally, she gave up and went downstairs, only to find Jackson sitting on the porch, a rifle across his lap. Couldn't sleep either? She asked, settling into the chair beside him. Wanted to make sure no one tried anything stupid. He glanced at her. You all right? I'm tired, Jackson. Tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of letting my past dictate my future. She turned to face him fully. Charles was a good man, but I never loved him. Not the way a wife should love a husband. I married him because I thought you were gone, and because my father gave me no choice. I spent 15 years in a marriage that was more friendship than passion, and when he died, I felt guilty for feeling relieved. Eleanor, I'm not finished. She took a deep breath. When I saw you in that store wearing my ring, My first thought wasn't about my situation or my problems. It was, he's even more beautiful than I remembered. And every day since, every moment we spend together, I fall back in love with you. Not with the boy you were, but with the man you've become. Jackson set the rifle aside carefully, his full attention on her now. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm ready. I'm saying I don't want to sleep alone in that room anymore when the man I love is sitting out here guarding me like I'm something precious. I'm saying that life is too short, and we've already lost 15 years. I don't want to lose another day. He stood slowly, moving to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. Eleanor Hayes, I loved you when we were young and stupid. I loved you through every year we were apart. I loved you through every moment of loneliness and heartbreak. And I love you now, maybe more than I ever did, because now I know what it's like to lose you. I won't survive losing you again. You won't have to. She cupped his face in her hands, feeling the roughness of his evening stubble, the warmth of his skin. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here, if you'll have me. If I'll have you? He laughed, the sound choked with emotion. Eleanor, you're all I've ever wanted. The ranch, the land, the horses, they were all just ways to fill the emptiness where you should have been. When they kissed, it was like coming home after a long journey. 15 years melted away, and they were 17 again, young and in love, and convinced they could conquer the world together. But they were also older now, scarred by life, but not broken, and the kiss held the weight of experience, of loss, of finding something precious that had been thought forever lost. Jackson pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. Marry me. Tomorrow, next week, whenever you want. But marry me, Eleanor. Let me spend the rest of my life making up for the years we lost. Yes, she whispered. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married 2 weeks later in a small church on the edge of town, with Rosa and Tom standing as witnesses. Eleanor wore a simple, cream-colored dress that Rosa had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Jackson wore his Sunday best, his silver ring on his right hand, waiting for the moment he could place a matching gold band on her left. I see a woman worth saving, he said as part of his vows, his voice rough with emotion. I see a woman worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth building a life for. I see the girl who gave me her heart when we were too young to know what that meant, and the woman who's giving it to me again, now that we understand exactly what we're promising. Eleanor's vows were equally heartfelt. You're not property, you're a person, you told me once, when my father called me chattel. You saw me as a human being with dreams and value when the world saw me as a bargaining chip. You loved me when I was poor and when I was rich. You waited when you had every reason to move on. Jackson Cole, I promise to love you, to stand beside you, to build a life with you that honors everything we've both survived to get here, together. Together, he echoed, and it became their word, repeated in whispers and promises, a vow renewed with every sunrise. But their peace was short-lived. A month after the wedding, Sutton returned, this time with a federal marshal and a warrant for Eleanor's arrest on charges of fraud and theft. The documents appeared legitimate, showing Eleanor's signature on loans that had been defaulted. It's impossible, Eleanor said, staring at the papers. I never signed these. I never even knew about these investments. The marshal, a weathered man named Harrison, looked sympathetic but firm. Ma'am, I have to take you into custody until this is sorted out. These documents bear your signature, and the law's the law. The hell you will, Jackson said, his hand moving to his gun. Jackson, no! Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Violence won't help. We'll fight this the right way." "Eleanor, the right way," she repeated firmly. "I won't have you throwing away everything you've built because of me. We'll prove these documents are forgeries. We'll find a way." The trial was set for 2 weeks later in the county seat. Jackson hired the best lawyer he could find, a sharp-minded woman named Margaret Chen who specialized in fraud cases. Together, they built their defense, but Eleanor could see the worry in Jackson's eyes, the fear that he'd finally gotten her back, only to lose her again. The night before the trial, they lay in bed together, the moonlight streaming through the window. Jackson traced patterns on her shoulder, his touch both comforting and desperate. "If this goes badly," he started, but Eleanor pressed her fingers to his lips. "It won't. We'll prove the truth. But if it does, I want you to know that these past few months have been the happiest of my life. Every morning, I wake up and see you beside me. I think I'm dreaming. Every time you smile at me, every time you say my name, I fall in love with you all over again." Eleanor turned to face him fully, her hand finding the silver ring he still wore. "Do you remember what I told you when I gave you this? I said, 'This is my promise. No matter what happens, no matter how long we're apart, I'm yours, always.' I remember. I've held on to those words for 15 years. Then hold on to them a little longer, because we're going to win this, Jackson. And then we're going to live the life we should have had all along." The trial was intense. Sutton presented document after document, all bearing Eleanor's signature. But Margaret Chen was brilliant. She brought in a handwriting expert who testified that while the signatures were good forgeries, they were forgeries nonetheless. The pressure of the pen, the slant of the letters, small details that revealed the truth. More damning for Sutton, Margaret uncovered evidence of other women he'd defrauded using the same scheme. 3 other widows came forward to testify, their stories mirroring Eleanor's. The case against Sutton began to crumble, but it was Eleanor's testimony that sealed the verdict. She stood in the witness box, poised and clear-eyed, and told her story, not just about Sutton's fraud, but about her father's cruelty, about a forced marriage, about 15 lost years. She spoke about Jackson's ring and the promise it represented, about the kind of love that survives separation and loss. "Mr. Sutton preys on vulnerable women because he assumes we're weak, that we won't fight back," she said, looking directly at the jury. "He assumed wrong. I'm not the frightened girl I once was. I'm not the woman who ran from Boston with nothing. I'm Eleanor Cole now, and I have something worth fighting for. I have a future worth protecting." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Sutton was found guilty on all counts. Eleanor was exonerated. As the verdict was read, Jackson's hand found hers, squeezing tight, and she felt the last chains of her past finally fall away. They rode home in the wagon, side by side, watching the sun set over the prairie. Jackson had been quiet since they'd left the courthouse, and Eleanor knew he was processing everything, allowing himself to finally believe it was over. "We won," she said softly. "We did." He pulled the wagon to a stop on a hill overlooking their ranch. "Look at that, Eleanor. That's ours. The house, the land, the life we're building. It's real. It's finally real. It's been real since the moment I walked into that store and saw you," Eleanor said. "Everything else was just details." Jackson turned to her, and in the fading light, she could see tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. "I love you so much, it scares me sometimes. The thought of losing you again." You won't. I promise you, Jackson Cole. You won't. We've survived 15 years apart. We've survived, my father. My marriage, poverty, fraud charges, and a criminal trial. We can survive anything as long as we're together. Together, he whispered, and kissed her, as the sun painted the sky in shades of fire and gold. 5 years later, Eleanor stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching Jackson teach their 4-year-old son James how to sit a horse. Their daughter, Rose, barely 2, toddled around the yard under Rosa's watchful eye. The older woman had become honorary grandmother to the children, and she doted on them shamelessly. Cole's pride had grown significantly. They now supplied horses to 3 territories and had expanded into cattle ranching as well. But more than that, it had become a home, a place filled with love and laughter, where the past was acknowledged but not allowed to define the present. Eleanor still wore the simple gold band Jackson had placed on her finger during their wedding, but Jackson still wore her mother's silver ring on his right hand, a symbol of the promise that had survived everything time and circumstance could throw at it. "Mama, look!" James called out, bouncing excitedly in the saddle, as Jackson led the horse in a gentle circle. "I see you, sweetheart. You're doing wonderfully," Eleanor called back. Jackson looked up at her, and even from a distance, she could see the love in his eyes. The same love that had been there when they were teenagers, planning their future. The same love that had survived 15 years of separation. The same love that would carry them through whatever years remained. She touched the ring on her finger, remembering another ring given so long ago. Some promises, she'd learned, were worth keeping. Some loves were worth waiting for. And some journeys, no matter how long or difficult, led exactly where they were meant to be. That evening, after the children were asleep, Eleanor and Jackson sat on their porch as they did most nights, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Jackson's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't walked into that store when you did?" Jackson asked quietly. "Sometimes. But then I remember what Rosa told me. She said you were in town specifically because you'd heard a traveler needed help. You came looking for someone to save, and found the only person who'd ever mattered to me." His lips brushed her hair. Funny how fate works. Fate, coincidence, providence, whatever you want to call it. All I know is that I'm grateful. Grateful for every moment we have together, even the difficult ones, because they brought us here. Jackson's hand found the silver ring on his finger, spinning it absently. "I used to look at this ring and remember the past. Now, I look at it and see our future. Everything we're building for James and Rose. Everything we still have ahead of us. 15 years apart, but hopefully 40 or 50 years together," Eleanor said. "Seems like a fair trade. Better than fair. It's everything I ever wanted." He tilted her face up to look at him. "Thank you for not giving up on us, for wearing my ring in your heart even when it wasn't on your hand, for coming back to me. I never really left, Jackson. Part of me was always here, always with you. I just had to find my way home." They kissed as the stars wheeled overhead. Two souls who'd been torn apart and miraculously reunited, who'd fought for their love and won. And in the house behind them, their children slept peacefully, unaware of the extraordinary journey their parents had taken to create the life they all now shared. The ring Eleanor had given Jackson all those years ago gleamed in the starlight, a silver promise kept. And the ranch they'd built together stood as a testament to the truth they'd both learned. that real love doesn't fade with time or distance. It endures, it waits, it survives. And when two people are meant to be together, no force on earth can keep them apart forever. The years continue to roll by like the prairie winds, constant, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, but always moving forward. James grew into a strong boy of 8, already showing his father's way with horses and his mother's quick mind. Rose, now 6, had inherited Eleanor's hazel eyes and Jackson's stubborn determination, a combination that both delighted and exhausted her parents. It was a crisp autumn morning when the telegram arrived. Tom rode up to the house at dawn, his face grave, and Eleanor knew immediately that something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked, stepping onto the porch as Jackson emerged from the barn. "Telegram from Boston," Tom said, handing Jackson the yellow paper. "Came through last night." Jackson's face paled as he read. Eleanor moved to his side, reading over his shoulder. Her sister Sarah's husband had died in a warehouse accident. Sarah was alone in Sacramento with 3 children and no means of support. "We have to go to her," Eleanor said immediately. "It's a 2-week journey, maybe more with the children," Jackson said, but there was no question in his voice. Family was family. "Rosa can manage the ranch with Tom and the boys. Sarah needs us, Jackson. She was there for me when I had nowhere else to go." Jackson nodded, already mentally preparing for the journey. "We'll leave in 3 days. That'll give me time to arrange things here and make sure we're properly supplied." The journey to Sacramento was arduous. They traveled by wagon for the first week, then switched to stagecoach, then wagon again, as they crossed through mountain passes and descended into California's Central Valley. James and Rose bore the journey with remarkable resilience, treating it as an adventure rather than a hardship. Eleanor watched Jackson with their children and felt her heart swell. He was patient when James asked endless questions about every rock formation and plant they passed. He was gentle when Rose grew tired and cranky, carrying her on his shoulders and singing old trail songs until she fell asleep. "You're a good father," Eleanor told him one night as they camped beneath a canopy of stars, the children asleep in the wagon. "Had a good example in what not to do," Jackson said darkly, thinking of Eleanor's father. "No, you had a good heart to begin with. My father couldn't have made you cruel even if you'd stayed in his employ." "You were always kind, Jackson. Even when you had nothing, even when the world treated you poorly, you remained kind." He pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the crackling fire and the distant howl of coyotes. Sacramento was a bustling city compared to Redemption Creek, full of noise and people and the smell of industry. Sarah's home was a modest house on the edge of town, and when Eleanor knocked on the door, her sister's tear-stained face appeared. "Ellie," Sarah sobbed, falling into Eleanor's arms. "Oh, Ellie, I didn't think you'd come. It's so far, and I know you have your own family." "Hush now. Of course I came. You're my sister." Eleanor held her tight, feeling how thin Sarah had become, how she trembled with exhaustion and grief. Sarah's children, Martha, 10, David, 8, and little Emma, just 4, were solemn and scared. Jackson immediately set about making them feel safe, engaging Martha in conversation about her schoolwork, teaching David a rope trick, and letting Emma ride on his shoulders around the small yard. "He's wonderful," Sarah whispered to Eleanor as they watched Jackson with the children. "You found yourself a treasure, Ellie." "I know. Took me 15 years and a lot of heartbreak to get back to him. But I know." Over the following days, they assessed Sarah's situation. It was worse than Eleanor had feared. Her husband had left debts, and the warehouse owner was refusing to pay any death benefits, claiming the accident was due to worker negligence. "That's a lie," Sarah said bitterly. "The scaffolding was rotten. Everyone knew it. But the owner's brother-in-law is the local judge, so who's going to believe a widow?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to him." "Jackson, no," Sarah protested. "He's a powerful man. He could make trouble." "Let him try." Jackson's voice was steel. "I didn't travel 2 weeks to watch my wife's sister be cheated." The warehouse owner, a corpulent man named Grissom, was dismissive when Jackson first approached him. "Your brother-in-law was careless. Case closed." "Show me the scaffolding that collapsed," Jackson demanded. "It's been disposed of." "How convenient. And the witnesses?" "All agree it was worker error." Grissom leaned back in his chair, smug. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to." Jackson didn't move. "You have 1 week to reconsider. If you don't do right by Sarah Marshall, I'll make it my personal mission to ensure every newspaper between here and San Francisco knows exactly how you maintain your equipment and treat your workers." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm promising you." Jackson leaned forward, his hands flat on Grissom's desk. "I'm a rancher from Redemption Creek, and I supply horses to half the army posts in 3 territories. I know people, Grissom, important people. People who'd be very interested to hear about unsafe working conditions and corrupt local officials. Your choice." Grissom's face reddened, but there was uncertainty in his eyes now. "Get out of my office." 1 week, Jackson repeated, and walked out. True to his word, Jackson began making inquiries. He found other workers who'd been injured due to Grissom's negligence. He tracked down the carpenter who'd warned about the rotten scaffolding weeks before the accident. He even managed to find pieces of the disposed scaffolding in a ravine behind the warehouse. Wood so rotten, it crumbled in his hands. 5 days after their first meeting, Grissom sent word that he wanted to settle. Sarah would receive a year's worth of her husband's wages, plus a lump sum for the children's future. It wasn't enough. Nothing could replace a father and husband. But it was enough for Sarah to keep her house and provide for her children. "How can I ever thank you?" Sarah asked Jackson, tears streaming down her face. "You were there for Eleanor when she needed family. That makes us even." Jackson smiled gently. "Besides, standing up to bullies is something I've gotten pretty good at over the years." As they prepared to return home, Sarah pulled Eleanor aside. "I want you to know something. When Papa forced you to marry Charles, I tried to stop it. I argued with him for hours, but I was just a girl and he wouldn't listen. I've carried guilt about that for 15 years. Eleanor embraced her sister. "There's no guilt to carry. You did what you could. We both survived Papa's cruelty, and we both found our way to something better. That's what matters now. Will you come visit again? The children adore James and Rose." "We will, and you'll come to us. Cole's Pride is always open to you and your family." The journey home felt shorter, perhaps because they were eager to return to their own beds and routines. But 2 days outside of Redemption Creek, disaster struck. They were crossing a shallow river when the wagon wheel hit a submerged rock. The axle snapped with a crack like a rifle shot, and the wagon lurched violently. Eleanor, who'd been standing to adjust Rose's blanket, was thrown into the water. The current wasn't strong, but Eleanor's head struck a rock as she fell. Jackson was in the water in seconds, pulling her up, but she was unconscious, blood streaming from a gash on her temple. "Mama!" Rose screamed, and James scrambled to control the horses, showing maturity beyond his years. Jackson carried Eleanor to the riverbank, his hands shaking as he checked her breathing. "Eleanor, Eleanor, open your eyes. Please. God, open your eyes." Her eyelids fluttered, and she groaned softly. Relief flooded through Jackson, so intensely he felt dizzy. "That's it, love. Come back to me. You promised you'd never leave me again. Remember? You promised." "Jackson." Her voice was weak, confused. "What happened?" "You took a tumble, hit your head. But you're all right. You're going to be all right." He was saying it as much to convince himself as her. They made camp right there, Jackson refusing to move Eleanor until he was certain she was truly all right. He sat up all night, watching her sleep, checking on her every few minutes, terrified that she might slip away. "Papa," James whispered from his bedroll, "is Mama going to die?" "No," Jackson said fiercely. "Your mother is the strongest person I know. She survived things that would have broken other people. A bump on the head isn't going to take her from us." Eleanor was weak and dizzy for the next 2 days, but gradually her strength returned. Jackson insisted on carrying her for most of the journey, only letting her walk for short stretches. His protectiveness would have been smothering if Eleanor hadn't recognized it for what it was. The fear of a man who'd almost lost everything that mattered. "I'm all right," she told him repeatedly. "Jackson, truly, I'm fine." "You scared me," he admitted one night, his voice rough. "When I saw you go into that water, when you didn't wake up right away. Eleanor, I saw my whole world ending. Everything we've built, everything we have, it all means nothing without you. You'd have survived. You're strong, Jackson. You survived 15 years without me before." "Survived, yes. But I wasn't living. Not really. I was just existing, waiting, hoping. You're my life, Eleanor. You and the children. Losing you would be like losing my soul." She cupped his face in her hands, seeing the fear still lingering in his eyes. "Then it's a good thing you're stuck with me for a very long time. I intend to be a meddling old woman, embarrassing our grandchildren and scandalizing the church ladies." He laughed, the sound breaking the tension, and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. When they finally reached Cole's Pride, Rosa ran out of the house, her face alight with joy. "Gracias a Dios. We were starting to worry. You were supposed to be back 3 days ago." "We had some delays," Jackson said dryly, helping Eleanor down from the wagon. "But we're home now, and that's what matters." Home. Eleanor looked at the ranch spread before her, the house they'd built, the corrals filled with horses, the land they'd worked and improved. Beyond it, she could see Tom and the other hands riding in from checking the cattle. Smoke rose from Rosa's kitchen chimney, carrying the scent of fresh bread. This was home. Not the house she'd grown up in, not the Boston mansion she'd shared with Charles. This place, built on love and determination and second chances. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Eleanor stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the autumn chill. Jackson joined her, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different my life could have been if you hadn't walked into that store, if I'd gone to Sarah's without stopping in Redemption Creek, if you'd taken that ring off at some point in those 15 years. Jackson's hand found the silver ring, still on his right hand after all these years. "Never even considered it. This ring was my promise to you, and I'm a man who keeps his promises. Even when the promise seemed impossible? Especially then, The impossible promises are the ones worth keeping, Eleanor. Anyone can keep an easy promise. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. The moonlight silvered his hair, where gray had begun to appear more prominently. Lines deepened around his eyes and mouth. They weren't young anymore, she realized. They were approaching middle age, that stage of life where the body began to slow and the past accumulated weight. But his eyes still held the same love, the same devotion, the same fierce commitment that had been there when he was a 20-year-old ranch hand, promising to build her a life. "I love you," she said simply. "I loved you when we were young. I loved you through all the years apart, even when I tried not to. And I love you now, more than I ever thought possible. I love you too. Always have, always will." He kissed her forehead gently. "Come on, it's getting cold. Let's go inside." As they turned to go in, Eleanor glanced back at the land one more time. Somewhere out there in the darkness, the prairie stretched endlessly, full of possibility and promise. Behind her, the house held her family, her future, everything she'd ever wanted. The ring on Jackson's hand caught the moonlight one last time, a silver promise kept through years of separation and struggle. Some love stories ended with happily ever after. Theirs had started with heartbreak, survived impossible odds, and was still being written one day at a time. And that, Eleanor thought, as Jackson's hand found hers and they walked inside together, was the best kind of love story there was. Winter came to Cole's Pride with a vengeance that year. Snow fell in heavy blankets, covering the prairie in white that seemed to stretch forever. The cattle huddled in the windbreaks Jackson and the hands had constructed, and the horses stayed close to the barn, where hay and warmth could be found. Inside the ranch house, life took on a different rhythm. The long, dark evenings meant more time for family, Jackson teaching James to carve wood by the fire, Eleanor helping Rose with her letters, all of them playing games and telling stories while the wind howled outside. It was during one of these storms that Rosa fell ill. The fever came on suddenly, raging through her body, while she shivered beneath every blanket they could pile on her. Eleanor barely left her side, sponging her forehead with cool water, forcing broth between her lips, praying to every saint she could remember from her childhood. "She's too old for this," Dr. Morrison said grimly when he finally made it through the snow to the ranch. "Her body's been strong, but at 65, a fever like this, you need to prepare yourselves." "No," Eleanor said flatly. "Rosa's survived everything life has thrown at her. She'll survive this too." Jackson pulled Eleanor aside. "Love, you need to rest. You've been up for 2 days straight." "I can't. Rosa was there for me when I first came here. She made me feel like family. I won't abandon her now." "Then let me sit with her for a while. You sleep for a few hours at least." Reluctantly, Eleanor agreed, but she couldn't sleep, just dozed fitfully, jerking awake every time she heard a sound from Rosa's room. On the third night, the fever broke. Rosa's eyes fluttered open, clear for the first time in days, and she smiled weakly at Eleanor. "You look terrible, mija," she croaked. Eleanor laughed through her tears. "You're one to talk. You scared us half to death." "Takes more than a little fever to kill this old woman." Rosa's hand found Eleanor's. "Thank you for taking care of me. Your family, Rosa. That's what family does." As Rosa recovered slowly over the following weeks, Eleanor found herself thinking more about family, about the one she'd created here at Cole's Pride, so different from the family she'd been born into. Her father had used family as a weapon, as leverage for his own ambitions. But the family she and Jackson had built was something else entirely. A chosen family, bound not by obligation, but by love. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it burst forth with an abundance that seemed to make up for the harsh winter. Wildflowers carpeted the prairie in every color imaginable, and the creek ran high and clear with snowmelt. James turned 9 that spring, and Jackson gifted him with his first real horse. Not a pony, but a young gelding that would grow with him. The boy's face lit up with such joy that Eleanor had to turn away to hide her tears. "What's wrong?" Jackson asked, finding her on the porch later. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's so right it almost hurts. Do you ever feel that way? Like, you're so happy you're afraid to trust it?" Jackson sat beside her, his arm going around her shoulders. "Every single day, every morning, I wake up with you beside me. Every time I hear the children laughing, every time I look at this ranch we've built. Yes, I feel that way, like I'm living in a dream, and I'm terrified of waking up. But we won't wake up. This is real, Jackson. We made it real through sheer stubbornness and love." "Mostly stubbornness," he said with a grin, and she swatted his arm playfully. That summer brought unexpected visitors. A fancy carriage rolled up to the ranch one afternoon, and a well-dressed couple emerged. The man was in his 50s, distinguished-looking with silver hair and keen eyes. The woman was younger, perhaps 40, beautiful and poised. "Can I help you?" Jackson asked, stepping off the porch. "Are you Jackson Cole?" the man asked. "I am. My name is Richard Thornton. I'm a horse broker from St. Louis. I've heard remarkable things about your operation here. I was hoping to discuss a business proposition." Over dinner that evening, Rosa had outdone herself, determined to show these city folk what Western hospitality looked like. Thornton explained his proposal. He wanted to contract with Cole's Pride to supply horses for a new stagecoach line being established across the territories. It would mean breeding and training 3 times as many horses as they currently handled, but the pay would be substantial. "I'd need to expand," Jackson said thoughtfully. "Hire more hands, build more corrals and stables." The initial contract would provide capital for expansion, Thornton said. "And if the partnership works well, there's potential for even larger contracts in the future." After the Thorntons left, promising to return in a week for Jackson's answer, Eleanor found her husband standing in the barn, staring at the horses. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about how this could change everything. We could provide real security for James and Rose. We could help Sarah more. We could make Cole's Pride into something that lasts for generations." He turned to face her. "But it would mean more work, more risk, and I'd have to spend more time training horses, less time with you and the children." Eleanor moved to stand beside him, leaning against the corral fence. "Tell me something, Jackson. When you built this place, what did you want it to be?" "And I wanted it to be a home, a place where the people I loved could feel safe and happy, where we could build a life together." "And has it been that?" "Yes. God, yes, Eleanor. Every day with you and the children has been." He stopped, emotion choking his voice. "Then don't lose sight of that in pursuit of something bigger. We have enough, Jackson. We have more than enough. A bigger operation might bring more money, but it won't bring more happiness. And it might cost us time we can't get back." Jackson was quiet for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from my husband. He taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be measured in dollars or acres. They're measured in moments. Moments like this, standing in a barn, talking about the future. knowing that whatever we decide together. When Thornton returned the following week, Jackson made his counteroffer. He'd accept a smaller contract, one that would allow him to expand modestly without fundamentally changing their way of life. Thornton was disappointed, but agreed, recognizing that a man who knew his priorities was exactly the kind of partner he wanted in business. As summer faded into autumn, life at Cole's Pride found a new rhythm. Jackson hired 2 more hands and built an additional corral. The children grew and learned, Rose beginning to show an interest in her mother's herb garden, while James spent every free moment with the horses. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, a ritual they'd maintained through all the years, Eleanor noticed Jackson turning the silver ring on his finger absently. "Do you ever think about taking it off?" she asked. "You have a gold wedding band now. You don't need to wear mine anymore." Jackson looked at her, surprised. "I'll never take this off, Eleanor. Your gold band means we're married. But this ring?" He held up his hand, the silver catching the dying light. "This ring means we survived. It means promises kept and faith maintained. It means 15 years of waiting weren't in vain. I'll wear both rings until the day I die, and I hope they bury me with them." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that we found each other again, that we have this life. Believe it." Jackson pulled her close, and they sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. "We earned this, Eleanor. Every moment of happiness, we earned it through pain and patience and refusing to give up on love." From inside the house came the sound of the children laughing at something Rosa had said. The horses nickered softly in their corrals. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate, and another answered. This was their life. Not perfect, not always easy, but theirs. Built on the foundation of a love that had survived everything time could throw at it. And as Eleanor sat there in her husband's arms, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The silver ring gleamed in the starlight, a promise kept. And in the warmth of Jackson's embrace, Eleanor understood that some promises don't end. They just keep being kept. Day after day, year after year, until they become not just a promise, but a life lived in devotion and love. Years turned like pages in a well-loved book, each one adding depth and richness to the story of Cole's Pride. James grew into a young man of 17, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's thoughtful nature. He had a way with horses that bordered on magical, and ranchers from 3 territories had begun making inquiries about hiring him. Rose, now 15, had blossomed into a beauty who seemed unaware of her own appeal. She'd inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's stubbornness, a combination that led to spirited discussions around the dinner table. She'd also inherited Eleanor's love of reading and had announced her intention to become a teacher. "A teacher," Jackson had said when she first mentioned it, his voice gruff with emotion. "Your mother would have loved to have had that opportunity at your age." "I know," Rose had replied, kissing his weathered cheek. "That's why I want to do it, to honor what she couldn't have." It was a crisp October morning when the letter arrived. Eleanor recognized her sister's handwriting immediately, but the normally neat script was shaky, urgent. "What is it?" Jackson asked, seeing Eleanor's face pale as she read. "Sarah's sick, really sick. Martha writes that the doctors don't know what's wrong, but she's getting weaker every day. She's asking if I can come. Jackson didn't hesitate. We'll leave tomorrow. But the ranch, the new foal's expected. Tom can handle it. Rosa will keep the house running. Family comes first, Eleanor. Always has. Always will. This time they traveled faster, just the two of them, leaving James and Rose with Rosa. The stagecoach rattled across the territories, stopping only briefly at way stations. Eleanor sat rigid with worry, and Jackson held her hand, offering silent support. They found Sarah in bed, pale and thin. Her breathing labored, but her face lit up when Eleanor entered the room. "Ellie, you came." "Of course I came, you silly woman. Did you think I wouldn't?" Eleanor sat on the bed, taking her sister's frail hand. Over the next weeks, Eleanor barely left Sarah's side. She fed her, bathed her, read to her from her favorite books. Jackson made himself useful around Sarah's house, fixing things that had fallen into disrepair, ensuring Martha, David, and Emma had what they needed. One evening, as Eleanor sat by Sarah's bed in the gathering darkness, her sister's hand squeezed hers weakly. "Ellie, I need to tell you something about Charles." "Sarah, rest." "No, I need to say this while I can." Sarah's voice was thin but determined. "Charles loved you, you know. Really loved you. He knew you didn't love him back, not the way a wife should love a husband. But he hoped that maybe, in time, you'd come to care for him." Eleanor felt tears track down her cheeks. "I did care for him. He was a good man. You just loved someone else. And Charles knew it. He used to tell me, in his letters, that sometimes he'd catch you staring off into the distance, and he knew you were thinking about Jackson. But he never held it against you. He just hoped to make you happy enough that the memories wouldn't hurt so much. I tried, Sarah. I tried to be a good wife to him. You were. He knew you tried, and he appreciated it. I'm telling you this now because I want you to know you don't have to carry guilt about Charles. He made his choice with his eyes open, and he never regretted it." Eleanor wept then, releasing tears she'd held for years. Guilt over not loving Charles as he deserved. Grief for the years lost with Jackson. Sorrow for all the complicated emotions that love and loss entangled. Sarah lingered for another month, and Eleanor refused to leave her side. Jackson stayed too, supporting Eleanor through the vigil, helping Martha prepare for the inevitable, being the steady presence that had always been his nature. When Sarah finally slipped away on a gray November morning, Eleanor held her hand and told her about the prairie flowers that would bloom next spring at Cole's Pride, about the horses running free across the grassland, about the life that awaited everyone in better days ahead. She told her sister about heaven, about their mother waiting there, about peace and rest and no more pain. After the funeral, Martha pulled Eleanor aside. At 20 now, she'd become a composed young woman, but tears streaked her face. "Mama made me promise to ask you something," she said. She wanted to know if David and Emma could come stay with you for a while, just until I can find better work, establish myself better. I can't take care of them properly right now, and Mama worried. "Of course they can," Eleanor said immediately. "For as long as they need. They're family, Martha. Cole's Pride is their home too." Jackson nodded his agreement. "We've got plenty of room, and James and Rose will be glad of the company. You focus on getting yourself settled, Martha. Your siblings will be safe and loved." So they returned to Cole's Pride with David, now 16, and Emma, 13. The house felt fuller, louder, more chaotic, and somehow more complete. David took to ranch work like he'd been born to it, and Emma and Rose became inseparable, more like sisters than cousins. But the months of vigil and grief had taken their toll on Eleanor. She grew thin and pale, her energy flagging. Jackson watched her with growing concern, seeing shadows under her eyes that never quite disappeared, noticing how she'd pause sometimes, her hand pressed to her chest, catching her breath. "You need to see Doc Morrison," he said one morning after finding her sitting on the porch steps, looking exhausted, though the day had barely begun. "I'm fine, just tired from the journey, from everything with Sarah." "Eleanor, I'm fine, Jackson." Her voice held an edge of irritation born from exhaustion and grief. "I don't need a doctor. I need time." But Jackson wasn't convinced. He asked Doc Morrison to come out to the ranch anyway, framing it as a routine visit to check on the whole family. The doctor's examination was thorough, and his face grew grave. When he emerged from Eleanor's room, Jackson knew immediately that the news wasn't good. "Her heart's weak," Morrison said quietly. "The strain of the past months, the grief, the travel, it's all taken a toll. She needs complete rest, Jackson. No work, no stress, just rest and quiet." "For how long?" Morrison met his eyes steadily. "I can't say for certain. With proper care, she could recover significantly. But her heart, once it's been weakened like this, it's never quite the same. You need to prepare yourself, Jackson. She's not a young woman anymore, and she's been through more in her life than most people could endure." Jackson felt the world tilt beneath him. "How bad is it?" "I won't lie to you. It's serious. But Eleanor's strong. She survived things that would have killed other people. If anyone can come back from this, it's her." That night, Jackson sat by Eleanor's bed as she slept, watching the rise and fall of her chest, listening to each breath like a prayer. His hand found the silver ring on his finger, and he thought about promises, about the promise a 17-year-old girl had made when she'd given him this ring, about the promises they'd exchanged in a small church years later, about the unspoken promise he made to her every single day, that he would love her and protect her and stand by her no matter what came. "You're not leaving me," he whispered into the darkness. "You promised, Eleanor. When I found you in that store, when you saw this ring, you promised you weren't going anywhere. I'm holding you to that promise." As if hearing him even in sleep, Eleanor's hand moved, finding his, holding tight. The next morning, Eleanor woke to find Jackson sitting beside the bed, looking exhausted and worried. "How long have you been there?" "All night." "Eleanor, Doc Morrison says your heart's weak. You need to rest. Really rest." "Jackson, I can't just lie in bed while there's work to be done." "Yes, you can. You will." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Rosa will handle the house. The kids can manage their own chores. Tom and the hands have the ranch well in hand. Your only job right now is to rest and get well." But no buts. "Eleanor, when I found you in that store 15 years ago, I made myself a promise. I promised that I'd spend every day of my life making sure you never had to suffer again, never had to be afraid again, never had to face anything alone. I'm keeping that promise now. Let me take care of you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared, Jackson. What if—" Don't even think it." He climbed into the bed beside her, gathering her carefully into his arms. "You're the strongest person I know. You survived your father, survived a loveless marriage, survived 15 years apart from me, survived trials and fraud charges and river accidents. You're going to survive this too." "You can't know that." "Yes, I can. Because you're Eleanor Cole, and Eleanor Cole doesn't give up. She doesn't quit. She fights and she survives, and she comes back stronger." He pressed his lips to her forehead. "And because I won't let you go, death itself will have to get through me first, and I promise you that's not happening." Despite her protests, Eleanor found herself confined to bed rest. It chafed at first, being waited on, being helpless. But gradually, as her strength began to return in small increments, she started to appreciate the forced slowdown. Jackson rarely left her side. He moved his paperwork to their bedroom, conducting ranch business from a chair beside her bed. He read to her in the evenings, novels and poetry and newspapers. He told her stories about the ranch, about the horses, about funny things the children had said or done. "You don't have to do this," Eleanor said one afternoon. "You have a ranch to run." "The ranch will run without me for a while, but I can't run without you." He looked up from the ledger he'd been reviewing. "Eleanor, you're my heart. Everything I've built, everything I've done, it's all been for you, because of you. If I have to choose between the ranch and you, there's no choice. It's you. It's always been you." Rose would sit with her mother in the afternoons, working on her lessons while Eleanor rested. Emma would bring wildflowers and arrange them in jars around the room. James would stop by between chores to tell her about the new foals or a particularly challenging horse he was training. And David, quiet David who'd lost his father, and now his mother, would sometimes just sit by her bed in the evenings, not saying much, just being present. Eleanor understood. He needed to know she wasn't leaving too, that this family he'd found wouldn't disappear like everything else had. "I'm not going anywhere," she told him one night, seeing the fear in his eyes. "I'm right here, David, and I'm getting stronger every day." Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Eleanor did grow stronger. By Christmas, she was able to sit up for longer periods, to join the family for meals, to take short walks around the house. By spring, she could venture outside, though Jackson hovered like a nervous mother hen, ready to catch her if she so much as stumbled. "I'm not made of glass," she complained one afternoon as he fussed over her shawl for the third time. "No, you're made of something much more precious than glass." He kissed her softly. "You're made of courage and strength and love, and I'm not taking any chances with you." By summer, Eleanor was almost back to her normal self, though Doc Morrison warned that she'd never have the stamina she once did. "Your heart's mended well, but it's been through the wars. Treat it gently." "I will," Eleanor promised. Then, seeing Jackson's skeptical look, she amended, "We will." That evening, they sat on the porch together, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The children, all of them, blood and chosen family alike, were scattered around the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. "I thought I was going to lose you," Jackson said quietly. "When Doc Morrison told me about your heart, I felt like I was 17 again, watching your father drag you away, knowing I might never see you again. But you didn't lose me. I'm right here. I know, and I thank God for it every single day." His hand found the silver ring, turning it absently. "This ring has seen us through so much. Separation, reunions, trials, illnesses. Sometimes I think it's magical, that as long as I wear it, we'll always find our way back to each other." "It's not magic, Jackson. It's love. Love is what brought us back together. Love is what's kept us together through everything." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, strong and sure. "And love is what will keep us together, for as long as we have. Then I guess we're set for eternity, because my love for you has no endpoint." Eleanor smiled, closing her eyes, breathing in the scent of sage and horses and home. Somewhere in the distance, the prairie stretched endlessly toward the horizon, full of promise and possibility. Behind them, the house held their family, their life, everything they'd built together. The silver ring on Jackson's hand caught the last rays of the setting sun, glowing warm and bright, a promise made decades ago, kept through everything fate could throw at them, shining still. Some love stories were written in the stars, Eleanor thought. Others were written in silver and tears, and the stubborn refusal to let go, even when everything seemed lost. Theirs was both, and she wouldn't change a single page of it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Eleanor and Jackson's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.